Elaine hadn't checked her voicemail in over a week, and for once, the silence felt like company. The faint scent of pumpkin spice lingered in the air as sunlight filtered through the faded curtains of her front window. She shuffled into the kitchen, slippers barely making a sound on the creaky wooden floorboards. The drip coffee machine burbled in its usual rhythm, a metronome of her mornings, and beside it, a corn muffin from yesterday waited in the toaster oven for just enough warmth, not too much, not too little. Outside, the distant horn of a passing train broke the stillness, a reminder that even in Maple Hollow, time moved forward, slow and steady. She opened the back door and stepped out onto the narrow porch, careful not to trip on the loose plank she kept meaning to fix. The November air was crisp but not yet cruel, and the maple tree beside the house was doing its best impression of fire, blazing orange and red above a bed of fallen leaves. A gray and white stray cat, lean but proud, trotted toward her from beneath the porch stairs, tail high. Elaine crouched, setting down a ceramic dish with a scoop of wet food. "There you go, warrior," she whispered, giving the cat a brief stroke between the ears. It blinked once, then dug in. From the other side of the chain-link fence, a voice called out, not loud, not urgent, but clear. "Morning, Miss Hartley. Still feeding that stray like a good soul?" Elaine turned to see Mr. Lamont, bundled in a brown cardigan and wool cap, standing on his porch with a coffee mug in hand. He nodded once, the way people in small towns did when they didn't want to intrude but also didn't want to be rude. She gave a small wave. "Habits hard to break." He smiled with his eyes more than his mouth, then turned back into his house without another word. She watched him go, something like gratitude swelling in her chest. He never asked questions. Not about her name, her past, or why she seemed to keep to herself. That, in itself, felt like a kindness. Back inside, the coffee had finished brewing. She poured a mug and added a splash of cream, then walked to her desk in the corner of the living room, past a framed print of a Vermont lake and a bookshelf half filled with client reports, half filled with old novels she couldn't part with. The desk lamp flickered when she turned it on, time to replace the bulb. Still, the warm circle of light felt reassuring. Before opening her laptop, she tapped her phone awake. 7 missed calls. 3 voicemails. All from the same number. She didn't press play. Instead, she set the phone face down and stared at the muted pumpkin-scented candle burning beside her mug. Her mother's voice echoed anyway, as clear as if it were coming from the hallway. "Elaine, this family can't just..." She shook her head and reached for her planner. She had an early video call with a client in Cincinnati, and another at 11 with a woman trying to untangle her late husband's pension. Normal things. Solid things. After the first meeting, she grabbed her keys and slipped on a light cardigan, deciding to check the mailbox. The walk down the narrow front path took less than a minute, but she moved slowly, scanning the yard as if expecting something to be out of place. Maple Hollow wasn't the kind of town where things changed quickly. The wooden mailbox leaned slightly to the left, another thing she hadn't fixed. She opened it, expecting junk mail, maybe a flyer about a church potluck. Just one envelope sat inside. Cream-colored, slightly bent. Her name written in her mother's handwriting, tight, slanted, efficient. No return address. No warmth in the curves. Elaine froze. The wind rustled a newspaper across the neighbor's yard. A dog barked once. The scent of chimney smoke drifted from a few houses down. She held the envelope like it might burn her, then slipped it into the side pocket of her cardigan. Back inside, she set it on the kitchen table beside her now cold muffin. She stood there a long moment, arms crossed, fingers tapping the edge of her elbow. She didn't open it. Didn't throw it away either. She just turned her back on it, as if by ignoring it, she could make it disappear. But it didn't. It stayed right there, cream-colored and accusing, while she returned to her desk, her planner, her work. The rest of the morning passed in spreadsheets and screen shares. Her clients never saw her pause, never noticed the way her eyes flickered to the table every so often, or the way her fingers lingered too long on the end call button after each meeting. At noon, she reheated the muffin again. The cat meowed outside. Mr. Lamont's blinds twitched open. The world went on. As she sat back down, adjusting the chair cushion she'd sewn herself months ago, her phone vibrated once. Then again. And again. She glanced down. Same number. Same name. She didn't even flinch. She let it ring. Elaine placed the letter on the kitchen table, still unopened, still too loud in its silence. The sun dipped low outside her kitchen window, casting long slants of amber light across the floor. Dust motes hovered in the air, barely moving. The scent of roasted squash curled upward from the oven, half for dinner, half to keep the kitchen warm without turning on the heat. She leaned against the counter, hands wrapped around a ceramic mug that radiated comfort more than warmth. The silence in the room wasn't absence, it was weight. The kind that pressed gently on her shoulders, a memory she hadn't invited. She didn't need to open the letter to know what it wanted. Timing alone was enough. Mid-November always meant the same thing. Thanksgiving. A year ago, she might have picked up the phone before the first ring ended. 2 years ago, she might have shown up early, grocery bags in hand, already dressed to help in the kitchen. 3 years ago, she still believed showing up meant something. She set her mug down, the soft clink of ceramic against tile louder than it should have been. On the table beside the letter sat her old laptop, the one she didn't use for work anymore but still kept charged for personal files. She opened it slowly, almost ritualistically, and waited for the outdated operating system to hum itself awake. The screen blinked once, then loaded a spreadsheet she hadn't touched in months. The numbers came back like second nature. Utilities, loan interest, emergency dental visits. Names filled the memo fields: Dad's tires, Kyle's software class, Mom's pharmacy bill. Next to each line, her own annotation: date sent, amount, no reply. The totals, even now, made her chest ache. She hadn't written those numbers for guilt. She wrote them so she wouldn't forget what she'd already given. A flicker of scent, brown sugar and nutmeg, sent her mind slipping into memory. 2 years ago, the house had smelled just like that. The oven had been on since morning, the air thick with butter and bickering. She had arrived first, arms full of grocery bags, coat still dusted with early frost. Her mother hadn't looked up from basting the turkey. "You remembered the cranberry sauce?" Marcia asked. Elaine had nodded. "And the cornbread mix. And the sparkling cider. And the..." Her brother had walked in halfway through her sentence, holding a boxed pie from the bakery down the street. Their mother's face lit up. "Oh, Kyle, you didn't have to. You're too thoughtful." Elaine had carried the bags to the kitchen without another word. She remembered every detail of that dining room, the lace-trimmed tablecloth that never quite fit, the doilies her mother insisted on putting under everything, even under the gravy boat. The old china cabinet, slightly crooked, with one handle missing. The faint hum of the 8-track player spinning a Nat King Cole album from decades past. During dinner, her father had clapped Kyle on the back after a passing comment about looking for freelance design work. "That's the spirit, son," Ron said. "Takes guts to keep trying." Elaine had poured more cider into her glass. She wasn't even sure anyone noticed when she got up to clear the dishes. Back in the present, she leaned away from the screen. Her throat felt tight, not from tears but from the press of years spent being steady in a family that praised chaos. She rose, walked to the kettle, and filled it with water. When the whistle blew, she dropped a tea bag into a pale blue mug and poured, watching the color darken like ink in water. On the counter, near the sink, lay her last wire transfer receipt. She hadn't thrown it out. $25,000. Clean. Precise. Final. She picked up the envelope. Her thumb grazed the flap. Her mother's handwriting was still sharp, no waver, no hesitation. The same hand that once signed school permission slips with a flourish. The same hand that had underlined recipes in her old cookbooks 3 times each. Elaine didn't sit down. She opened the envelope standing up, like it was easier to process disappointment on her feet. 5 words. 5 cold, neatly spaced words on a single sheet of white paper. "Thanksgiving is coming. Your choice." She stared at the paper, waiting for more. Love, Mom." A "hope you're well." Even a signature. Nothing. Just that stiff, declarative sentence. A summons masked as freedom. She folded the note once and placed it back inside the envelope, tucking it under the edge of a placemat. She didn't know why she saved it. Maybe proof. Maybe habit. Her tea had gone lukewarm. The squash in the oven was beginning to char at the edges. She walked to the window and looked out at the neighbor's yard. Mr. Lamont's porch light flickered on, though daylight still clung stubbornly to the horizon. A pie sat cooling on his railing again. Apple, if she had to guess. Her own porch light hadn't been on in weeks. She returned to the table, pulled the chair out gently, and eased herself down. Her fingers traced the rim of the mug, slowly. She leaned back and whispered, "It always has been." Then she closed the letter, calmly. She told herself she was just going out for groceries, but her car knew exactly where it was going. The sky over Maple Hollow had turned to pewter, clouds hanging low with the weight of a coming drizzle. Elaine gripped the steering wheel a little tighter as her tires hummed against the damp pavement. She hadn't written down a grocery list. She hadn't even brought her reusable bags. Truth be told, she didn't need anything. But the silence of the house had felt too loud, and any movement, seemed preferable to sitting alone with unopened memories. The town passed by her window in familiar vignettes, the barber shop with its crooked candy cane pole, the library where the door always stuck in the cold, the blinking sign above Edna's diner announcing Friday's special, meatloaf and mashed, $6.50 with pie. Two older men sat in the front booth as always, one sipping coffee while the other read the paper aloud as if it were the morning news on TV. At the corner gas station, a boy no older than 16 struggled to hang a string of discount banners that flapped violently in the breeze. Behind him, a woman filled up a weathered pickup, her wool coat buttoned all the way to the top. Thanksgiving was less than a week away, and Maple Hollow was inching toward holiday mode with the quiet inertia of a town that never rushed anything. Elaine's fingers tapped unconsciously against the steering wheel as she drove past the old high school. The marquee still hadn't been updated, homecoming dance, October 13th. A month late and no one had noticed, or cared. When she turned onto Hollow Pine Road, her breath caught before she could stop it. She hadn't meant to come here. Not consciously. But the curve of the hill, the familiar trees standing like old sentinels, it was muscle memory. And there it was. The house. The siding needed repainting. The mailbox leaned even more than she remembered. But the porch light was on, glowing faintly in the gray afternoon, and there was a new car in the driveway. Not brand new, but newer than anything Kyle should have been driving. Sleek lines, dark paint, the kind of vehicle that whispered quiet affluence. Elaine pulled to the curb half a block away, putting the car in park without turning off the engine. She sat there, watching. The house didn't look abandoned. It looked maintained. Lived in. Which didn't match the calls she'd been ignoring, the messages about hardship and foreclosure. She opened her banking app with a practiced flick of her thumb, then tapped into the old joint account, the one she used to send money when things were tight. The one tied to the mortgage. It loaded slower than usual, perhaps because she hadn't touched it in months. But the data was clear once it appeared. 8 months overdue. No payments made since early spring. No record of the deposits she'd sent in good faith, labeled with the careful note, mortgage support. Her last message from her father echoed in her mind, "Thanks again for the help. We're square for now." She closed her eyes. The leather of the driver's seat was cool beneath her back, grounding and slightly stiff. She flexed her fingers, trying to will the tightness out of her knuckles. The betrayal wasn't a thunderclap, it was a slow drizzle, steady and seeping. She had handed them oxygen, and they'd lit a match. Outside, movement caught her eye. Through the side window, she saw Mr. Lamont on his porch down the street, rocking slowly in a wooden chair with a plaid blanket across his knees. He looked straight ahead, not at her, but something about his stillness made her feel seen anyway. Like he knew she didn't come this way by accident. Elaine's phone was still in her hand. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard. She didn't hesitate this time. Didn't wonder if it was worth it. She typed slowly, each letter deliberate, like laying bricks. Just checked the mortgage account. It's overdue. Where did the money go? The house looked the same, but somehow smaller now that she saw it through different eyes. Elaine stood at the bottom of the steps for a long moment, the wind pressing against the back of her coat, carrying the distant scent of chimney smoke and wilted leaves. The porch was decorated in a strained kind of cheer, plastic pumpkins flanked either side of the door, their grins fixed and hollow, and a laminated cartoon turkey clung to the storm door with curling tape. A string of orange lights looped along the railing, some bulbs already dim or dead. Everything about it was familiar, and yet distant, like a photograph of a place that used to mean something. She raised her hand to knock but didn't need to. The door opened before her knuckles made contact. Marcia stood there in a cranberry-colored sweater, dish towel draped over one shoulder, a look of confused surprise tightening her features. Behind her, the warmth of the kitchen bled out, the clatter of pans, the murmur of a television playing a football game. "Elaine," she said, as if testing whether the name still fit. "I need to talk to Dad," Elaine replied, her voice calm but hollow. "And Kyle." Marcia stepped aside reluctantly, clutching the towel in both hands now. "They're in the living room." Elaine stepped inside, and the first thing she noticed was the smell. Nutmeg and poultry fat and artificial vanilla. It hit her harder than she expected. Memory clung to every surface, the scratched hardwood, the framed cross-stitch above the hall mirror, the coat hook that always leaned left. It felt preserved, like a shrine to the idea of family, not its reality. She entered the living room without removing her coat. Ron sat in his recliner, remote resting on his belly, the television flickering muted highlights. Kyle was sprawled across the couch, socks mismatched, scrolling his phone. Elaine remained standing. "I checked the mortgage account." Ron's eyes didn't meet hers. "Elaine, maybe this isn't the..." "It's 8 months overdue," she said, cutting him off. "I sent money. More than enough to cover it." Repeatedly. Kyle didn't look up. "We didn't ask for it. You just kept sending." Elaine turned toward him. "No. You did ask. Not directly, maybe. But we're short this month, can you help until we're back on our feet, you all asked." Again and again. Marcia came in, folding the towel with deliberate care. "You walked out, remember? We didn't push you. You left." "I left," Elaine said, "after I paid $25,000 to save this house. And you didn't use it for that." Ron shifted in his chair, suddenly busy adjusting the volume. Things got complicated. Medical bills. Other expenses. "Then say that," Elaine snapped. "But don't lie. Don't take and pretend it's gratitude." Kyle finally looked up. "It's just money, Elaine. You make more than any of us. What's the big deal?" "The big deal," she said, pulling a folded sheet of paper from her coat pocket, "is that I kept records. Every cent. Every date. Every single time I helped. And not once, was I told the truth." Marcia crossed her arms. "You always needed to be the martyr. The one keeping score." Elaine stared at her. "I kept score because no one else was paying attention." Marcia's eyes narrowed. She turned and picked up a serving spoon from the dining table and slapped it against the counter, the clang sharp and metallic. "If it's such a burden," she said, each word clipped, "then don't come back. We didn't ask you to carry everything." The room fell quiet, the only sound the low murmur from the television. Elaine looked around. The photos on the wall. The garland around the doorway. The crooked placemat on the coffee table. Everything was exactly where it used to be, as if time had bent around the space to avoid acknowledging her absence. She felt the weight of the carpet beneath her feet, but not the warmth. Her shoes left no mark on the welcome mat. She looked around the house one last time and replied. "You didn't have to ask. You just expected it." Then she turns and walks out the front door. Elaine found the pie before she even saw the note, still warm, smelling of cinnamon and clove. It was sitting on her porch step like an old friend, nestled in a glass dish with a cloth napkin folded neatly beneath it. Steam still curled up from the crust, its golden top cracked ever so slightly where the filling had bubbled through. She paused at the threshold, arms crossed against the morning chill, uncertain whether to be surprised or moved. Sunlight filtered through the bare trees lining her street, brushing the porch in slow amber strokes. A breeze stirred the hem of her robe and teased the edge of the dish's napkin, revealing a cream-colored card tucked beneath. She crouched, carefully lifting the card. The handwriting was steady, old-fashioned. Sometimes, kindness isn't acknowledged. But it is always remembered. TL. She didn't need a signature to know who had left it. Mr. Lamont's porch was just visible across the street, and as she glanced over, he appeared through his screen door, cardigan buttoned to the top, holding 2 mugs of coffee as if he'd been waiting for her to wake. Elaine raised the card slightly, her silent thanks. He nodded and ambled across the street, his steps slow but sure on the gravel walkway. She opened the door and gestured him inside. "I figured you'd want yours black," he said, handing her 1 mug. "Didn't want to guess wrong on a holiday." She smiled faintly and stepped aside so he could enter. The kitchen was cozy in the way a room becomes when someone else is in it. Sunlight pooled on the floor, catching in the grain of the wood, and the curtains danced gently in the draft from the slightly open window. Somewhere down the block, a neighbor's radio was playing low, an old Bing Crosby tune crooning about silver bells. Elaine set the pie on the counter, lifting the glass lid to let it cool. Mr. Lamont sat at the small kitchen table, where 2 chairs had always seemed too many for 1 person but just enough for 2. They didn't speak at first. The mugs warmed their hands, and the silence stretched, not awkward but intentional. "My wife used to make a pie like that every Thanksgiving," he said at last, his voice deep and soft. "She'd put too much clove in it, but she said it tasted like memories." Elaine chuckled gently. "This one smells like it came from someone who's made a few." "I've had years to practice," he said, then sipped. "But the note, well, I thought you should hear something kind for once." She looked down at her mug. "I'm not sure I've earned that." "You're not supposed to earn kindness," he said. "That's the point." She sat down across from him. The chair creaked under her, a sound she hadn't heard in a long time. "You said once, about your daughter, that she stopped calling. Did she ever come back?" "No," he replied, gaze drifting toward the window. "But I kept the porch light on for a while. Just in case." He turned back to her. "People get tired of being needed only when it's convenient." "I don't blame her." Elaine nodded slowly. "She's the reason someone helped me, though," he added. "Years ago, after my wife's surgery. I never found out who. Bills just disappeared. I think it was someone who'd seen me at the pharmacy, or maybe someone she'd taught piano to. I tried to repay it for years. But sometimes you don't get to." "Maybe you already did," Elaine murmured. He gave her a look, gentle, measured. "Kindness," he said, "is a thread. You pull on it, and it winds around in ways you won't always see. But one day, it might tie itself back to you." They sat like that for a while, 2 coffee mugs steaming between them, warming the space they didn't fill with words. Eventually, Mr. Lamont stood and stretched. "I'll let you enjoy your morning. You don't need anyone crowding you on a day like today." As he reached the door, Elaine turned back to the pie dish. Something was tucked just beneath the cloth napkin, an envelope she hadn't noticed before. She opened it carefully. Inside was a printed card from a local food bank, dated from the previous spring. "Thank you for your anonymous generosity. Your donation fed 18 families." No name. No mention of her. But it had come to her address. Her account. Her quiet act, months ago, long forgotten, until now. She looked up, but Mr. Lamont had already stepped off the porch. He waved without turning. Elaine watched him go, then turned the card over and stared at it, her fingers tracing the embossed edges. A smile tugged at her mouth, small, real, almost surprised by its own return. Maybe it was never about them seeing it. Maybe it was about me seeing myself. Elaine didn't knock. She just placed the box gently, like laying down the last stone of a bridge no one would cross. The sky above Maple Hollow was streaked with soft pink and molten gold, as if the day itself had exhaled in relief. Thanksgiving evening wrapped the town in a hush broken only by the occasional distant bark of a dog or the muffled clatter of dishes behind closed windows. The scent of turkey and sweet potatoes lingered in the air, escaping through doorframes and chimney flues like memories too large to contain. Elaine stood on the edge of her parents' porch, the hem of her coat brushing the tips of the pumpkins still sitting untouched on the steps. The string lights overhead flickered half-heartedly. She didn't ring the bell. She didn't step closer than she needed to. She just reached into the passenger seat of her car, lifted the small box, and set it down on the doormat. Inside was the last slice of pumpkin pie, wrapped carefully in wax paper and placed inside a reusable tin. Next to it, folded with precision, was a flannel scarf in navy and forest green, the edges softened from years of wear. She had found it in the back of her closet earlier that morning, tucked in a forgotten bin. Her mother had knitted it when Elaine was in college, a Christmas gift paired with a matching pair of mittens that had long since disappeared. At the bottom of the box was a plain envelope. Inside was a prepaid grocery card for $100. No note. No name. She straightened slowly, hands brushing her coat as if to shake off the moment. There was no need to linger. No one was looking out the window. No footsteps approached the door. The air was still, but her heart was not. It beat quietly, steadily, no longer heavy. Back in the car, she rolled the windows down halfway. The air smelled like roasted pecans and pine needles. Somewhere in the distance, a radio played a Sinatra ballad too faint to catch the lyrics. She drove without urgency, turning left at the church where wreaths had been hung that morning, right past Edna's diner now closed for the holiday, and straight through the neighborhood where children once rode bikes in summer and skated in winter. At home, she changed into thick socks and lit the candle she saved for rare evenings, clove, cedar, and something warm she could never quite name. She took a seat at her kitchen table, where a half-filled journal lay waiting. The same mug from earlier sat on the windowsill, empty now, but still warm to the touch. She opened the notebook and picked up a pen. She didn't write about her family. Not tonight. Instead, she wrote about the light on Mr. Lamont's porch, about the pie, about the feeling of being remembered without being summoned. She wrote about the strange peace that came when you let go of waiting to be understood. Her phone buzzed. A message from Maggie. Join us for dinner? Still have room at the table. Elaine stared at the screen for a moment, then looked up at the mirror across the room. Her reflection met her gaze, not guarded, not uncertain. Just present. She replied, "I'd love to," and began to change into a deep green sweater, something she hadn't worn in years. As she locks the door behind her, the candle flickers, and the house smells of cinnamon and courage. On a quiet Thanksgiving evening, a woman left a small box on a porch she once called home, not out of duty, but out of peace. In that simple act, she didn't seek forgiveness or recognition, only release. Sometimes, kindness isn't about being seen, it's about seeing ourselves clearly, even when others choose to look away. Like a candle left in a window, quiet compassion can still guide us through the dimmest corners of our lives. If this story stirred something in you, perhaps it's time to leave your own light on for someone who's forgotten how to return.